She never imagined that a simple detour would trap her inside a mansion that belonged to a stranger where fear whispered through the walls and love waited in the shadows. Row. The night had fallen earlier than expected. Rain lashed against the windshield, and the sound of thunder rolled like an angry beast across the sky. Emily gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding faster with each flash of lightning. She had taken the wrong turn on a deserted road, and now the GPS refused to guide her back. The road stretched into darkness, with tall, looming trees pressing in from both sides, making her feel as if the world was swallowing her whole. When the car suddenly sputtered and died, she felt her stomach drop. She tried the ignition again and again, but the engine refused to come alive. Rainwater slid down the glass, blurring her vision, and panic threatened to take control. She needed shelter, any shelter. That's when her eyes caught sight of a dim light in the distance. Forcing herself out into the storm, she followed the flickering glow until the shape of a colossal mansion emerged. Its towering windows glistened under the rain. Its gates creaked with the weight of years, and the air around it carried the scent of secrets. Something about the mansion screamed danger, yet desperation pushed her forward. Emily knocked on the massive wooden door. At first, there was silence, and she thought no one would answer. But then, slowly, the door opened with a groan, revealing a tall figure standing in the shadows. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, studied her carefully. He said nothing at first. I looked at her as though measuring every breath she took. I'm sorry, she stammered. My car broke down. Could I wait inside until the storm passes? The man tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Finally, with a voice that rumbled low and deep, he said, "Come in. But once you enter, there is no turning back tonight." Emily hesitated, her instincts screaming to run. Yet the storm behind her roared like a beast, and the mansion, despite its menace, offered shelter. She stepped inside, unaware that this night would change the course of her life forever. The interior of the mansion was even more intimidating. The walls were lined with old portraits, men and women with cold eyes that seemed to follow her. Chandeliers swayed gently as if stirred by invisible hands. The silence inside was thicker than the rain outside. The man finally closed the door, locking it with a sound that echoed through the halls. "You may stay," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. "But know this house has its rules. Break them, and you will regret stepping through that door." A shiver ran down her spine. She opened her mouth to ask what rules he meant, but the words died in her throat. Something about his presence both terrified and intrigued her. His face, though marked by shadows, carried a certain intensity, a kind of sorrow she couldn't understand. Emily followed him deeper into the mansion, her footsteps echoing against the marble floor. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had walked into a cage. And yet, as she glanced at the stranger leading her into the unknown, a strange thought flickered in her mind. Maybe the cage wasn't meant to trap her, but to protect her. The deeper she stepped into the mansion, the louder her heartbeats became. Every shadow threatened danger. Yet every glance at the stranger pulled her closer into a mystery she could no longer escape. Emily's shoes squeaked against the polished marble floor, leaving small, wet footprints behind her. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with oil paintings so old that the colors had faded into ghostly shades. She caught herself staring at one particular portrait, a woman with pale skin and haunting eyes that seemed almost alive. For a moment, Emily felt the painted gaze pierce through her soul. "Don't linger on the portraits." The man's voice broke the silence, sharp and commanding. "The eyes see more than you realize." She flinched, quickly shifting her attention back to him. His tone wasn't angry, but there was a weight in his words that made her uneasy. She followed him until they reached a grand room, lit dimly by a roaring fireplace. The flames crackled, casting tall, dancing shadows across the walls. Despite the warmth, Emily wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to a leather armchair near the fire. Emily hesitated but obeyed. She kept her gaze fixed on him, trying to read his face. His features were sharp and defined, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead. There was a strength about him, but also a sadness he seemed to carry like a hidden scar. "I'm Emily," she offered cautiously, her voice breaking the heavy silence. He didn't answer right away, stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames as though searching for something within them. Finally, he said, "Adrian." The name hung in the air like an unspoken secret. "Thank you for letting me in," Emily continued, her nerves tightening with each word. "I promise I won't be any trouble. Soon as the storm ends, I'll leave." Adrian's eyes finally met hers. They were dark, unreadable, but there was a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. "You don't leave until I say you can." Her breath caught. "What?" "This house," Adrian said, his voice low but firm, "doesn't let people come and go so easily. Once you've stepped inside, the rules apply to you." Emily felt her throat tighten. "Rules? What rules?" He moved closer, his footsteps deliberate, almost predatory. "When you don't wander the halls after midnight. 2, you don't enter the West Wing under any circumstances. And 3, you never ever open the red door." A shiver crawled down her spine. The way he said it wasn't a threat, it was a warning. She wanted to laugh, to dismiss his words as some kind of dark joke, but the seriousness in his eyes silenced her. Her instincts told her to run, to escape, but the storm outside howled louder, reminding her she had no choice. She was trapped for tonight at least. As the firelight flickered across his face, she noticed something she hadn't before. Behind the sternness in Adrian's expression, there was pain, raw, buried pain. And though fear kept her on edge, a strange curiosity began to grow within her. Who was this man? Why did he live in this mansion of secrets? The silence stretched between them, heavy with questions unasked. Emily knew one thing for certain. This night would not end the way she imagined. Outside, the thunder cracked again, but inside the mansion, another storm was only beginning. The storm outside raged on, but Emily realized the real storm was inside the mansion's walls carried whispers of secrets, and Adrian himself was the greatest mystery of all. The fire snapped, sending sparks upward as Emily shifted uncomfortably in the armchair. Adrian had retreated into silence again, leaning against the mantel, his gaze locked on the flames as though the world beyond them didn't matter. She wondered if she should break the silence or simply sit in stillness until morning. But her curiosity gnawed at her. "You live here alone?" she finally asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Adrian didn't move at first, but then he nodded slowly. "Alone, not entirely." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You'll see. Perhaps you won't. That depends on you." Before she could question further, A sudden creak echoed through the hall outside. Emily jumped, clutching the arms of her chair. Adrian, however, didn't flinch. His face remained calm, almost expectant. "It's the house," he said quietly. "It has a way of reminding us that we're never truly alone." Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to believe it was just the wind, the storm pressing against the old wooden beams, but deep inside, she knew it wasn't. After what felt like hours, Adrian finally spoke again. "Should rest. The storm won't end tonight." Her eyes widened. "You mean I have to stay here all night?" His gaze softened slightly, though his tone remained guarded. "Yes, the guest room is down the hall. I'll show you." Emily followed him reluctantly. The hallway was darker than before, lit only by dim lamps that flickered as though struggling to stay alive. The portraits loomed above her, their painted faces watching, judging. She kept her eyes on Adrian's broad back, finding comfort in his steady stride despite the fear gnawing inside her. He stopped at a door and opened it slowly. The room inside was spacious, draped in velvet curtains, and furnished with an ornate bed that looked centuries old. Dust clung to the corners, but the bed itself seemed untouched, as though waiting for her. "You'll stay here," Adrian said. "Do not leave this room after midnight, do you understand?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. I understand." He lingered a moment, his eyes searching hers. For a second, she thought he might say something more, something personal, but instead, he simply turned and left, closing the door behind him. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her thoughts racing. The rules, the warnings, the strange energy of the mansion, it was too much. And yet, in the midst of her fear, she couldn't stop thinking about Adrian. His voice, his eyes, the sadness he carried. Hours passed. The storm outside began to fade, though thunder still grumbled in the distance. Emily tried to sleep, but her mind refused to rest. She tossed and turned until finally her eyes drifted open to the sound of a faint whisper. It wasn't the wind, it was inside the room. She froze, her heart hammering. The whisper was soft, almost like a lullaby sung from another world. Slowly, she turned her head toward the corner, and her blood turned cold. There, near the heavy velvet curtains, stood a figure, pale, motionless, watching her. Emily's scream died in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe.
Ow.
The figure didn't step closer, didn't vanish. It simply stood there. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Emily gasped, sitting upright, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She told herself it was exhaustion, her mind playing tricks. But deep down, she knew better. This mansion wasn't just Adrian's home. It was alive, and whatever lived here with him was watching her too. She thought the mansion's owner was her greatest fear. But the shadow in the corner proved something else. This place belonged to secrets that refused to stay hidden. Emily's hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest, trying to calm her breathing. Her eyes darted back toward the curtains, half expecting the figure to return. But the corner was empty now, swallowed in the dark folds of velvet. She forced herself to whisper, "It's just my imagination." It has to be. Yet no matter how many times she repeated it, her pulse wouldn't slow. Unable to stay still, Emily slipped out of bed and paced the room. The mansion seemed to breathe around her, the faint groan of wood, the distant creak of a hallway, the moan of wind seeping through old cracks. Every sound fed her unease. A sudden knock startled her. She froze, staring at the door. "Emily," Adrian's deep voice called from the other side. "Are you awake?" Her throat was dry, but she managed. "Yes." The door opened, and Adrian stepped in, his face partially lit by the flickering hallway lamp. His eyes scanned her quickly, noting her pale complexion and trembling hands. "You saw something," he said, not as a question, but as a certainty. Emily's lips parted. There was someone in here, in the corner, watching me. Adrian's jaw tightened. He closed the door behind him, then crossed the room and measured steps. He didn't look surprised, if anything. He seemed resigned. He reached the curtains and pulled them back swiftly. Nothing. The window was bolted shut, the corner empty. "It's this house," Adrian murmured, his voice carrying an edge of sorrow. "It shows things. Things you may not be ready to see." Emily's fear turned to confusion. "What does that mean? Who was she? 'Cause I swear it was a woman." His eyes darkened, and for the first time she saw a shadow of pain cross his features. "She doesn't matter. What matters is that you follow the rules. Do not wander. Do not search for answers you don't want to find." "But how can I not?" Emily's voice trembled. "You expect me to stay here, in this haunted place, and act as if nothing's happening?" For a moment, his mask cracked. He stepped closer, so close that Emily could feel the faint warmth radiating from him despite the chill of the room. His eyes met hers, intense and conflicted. "Because fear," he whispered, "is sometimes the only thing keeping you alive." Her breath caught. The air between them thickened with tension. Not just from fear, but from something far deeper, an invisible pull neither could deny. Adrian seemed to realize it too, because he pulled back abruptly, his jaw clenched. "Rest," he said sharply, though his tone trembled with something unspoken. "Promise me." Emily wanted to protest, but something in his eyes, something fragile, almost pleading, stopped her. She nodded. "I promise." Satisfied, Adrian turned and left, shutting the door with a heavy thud. Emily stood frozen for a long while. Her heart was a battlefield of terror and curiosity, fear and something dangerously close to fascination. When she finally lay back down, sleep claimed her in restless fragments. Streams of whispers, of pale faces and locked doors, tangled with the image of Adrian's sorrowful eyes. Morning came slowly. Sunlight pierced through the curtains, painting the room in golden streaks. For a moment, the mansion seemed almost ordinary, as if the horrors of the night had been a dream. But when Emily opened the door, she realized the truth. The mansion in daylight was no less strange. The halls were eerily silent. She wandered cautiously, drawn by curiosity despite the warnings. She passed portraits she hadn't noticed before, portraits of Adrian, younger, with the same sorrow in his eyes. And always beside him in the paintings, a woman. The same pale face she had seen in her room. Emily's breath quickened. Who was she? Why was her image everywhere? Just then, Adrian appeared at the end of the hall. His eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time since they'd met, his voice carried a sharp edge of anger. "I told you not to wander." She thought wandering the halls would give her answers. But instead, she walked straight into the very secret Adrian was desperate to keep hidden. Emily froze where she stood, Adrian's figure looming at the end of the hallway. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid, and his dark eyes burned with something she couldn't name: anger. Yes, but also fear. I just woke up early, Emily stammered. "I didn't mean to. You broke the first rule." His voice was low, sharp as glass. The weight of his words pressed down on her, making her chest tighten. She wanted to defend herself, to say that she hadn't gone far, that she was only curious, but his expression silenced her. He strode toward her, his footsteps echoing like a drumbeat in the quiet hall. When he reached her, he leaned in, his face inches from hers. Curiosity in this house can kill you. Do you understand? Emily's breath hitched. Her instinct screamed to look away, but she couldn't. His eyes, for all their anger, carried a depth of sorrow that made her heart twist. "Then tell me," she whispered, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Tell me why I saw her, the woman in my room. Tell me who she is." For a moment, Adrian's mask slipped. His gaze flickered, pain rippling across his face. But then he straightened, retreating into coldness again. "You'll find no comfort in the answers," Emily swallowed. "Maybe not. But I can't live in fear without knowing what I'm afraid of." Adrian said nothing. Instead, he turned on his heel. "Follow me." Her pulse quickened as she trailed behind him, deeper into the mansion. They passed endless doors, each locked, until finally they stopped in front of one, its frame painted in dark crimson, the red door. Emily's skin prickled. She remembered his rule: never open it. And yet here they were. Adrian's hand hovered over the handle, but he didn't open it. His voice dropped, softer now, filled with weight. "On the other side lies the truth you keep asking for. But once you see it, you can never unsee it." Emily's breath caught. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Her curiosity and fear clashed violently inside her. "Was it her?" she asked finally. "The woman in the portraits? It's the one I saw last night?" Adrian's eyes closed briefly, as though the name itself was a wound. When he opened them again, they glistened with something raw. Her name was Isabella. Emily felt a chill run through her. "Was he?" nodded slowly. "She was my wife." The words struck her like thunder. Pieces began to fall into place. The sorrow in his gaze, the warnings, the figure that had stood silently in her room. "But she's gone now," Adrian continued, his voice breaking for the first time. "And yet this house refuses to let her go." Emily's chest tightened with a mix of fear and pity. She could almost feel the weight of his grief pressing against her own heart. For the first time, she saw Adrian not as a cold stranger, but as a man haunted by love lost, trapped in a cage of memories. She wanted to speak, to comfort him, but before she could, the air around them shifted. A cold draft swept through the hallway, and the crimson door rattled violently, as though something on the other side demanded to be freed. Adrian's face hardened. He grabbed Emily's wrist, pulling her away. "Not now. Not today." They hurried back toward the main hall, the sound of the rattling fading behind them. Emily's mind swirled with questions, but her heart throbbed with something she hadn't expected, an aching pull toward Adrian. As they stopped near the grand staircase, he released her wrist. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. "This house feeds on weakness, on fear. If you let it, it will devour you the way it devoured me." Emily looked at him, her chest rising and falling. "Then why do you stay?" For the first time, Adrian didn't answer, simply turned away, his silence speaking louder than words. And in that silence, Emily realized something terrifying. She wasn't just trapped in the mansion. She was trapped in his world. And part of her didn't want to escape. She had come seeking shelter from a storm. But now Emily realized she was inside a storm far greater, one bound by love, loss, and a mansion that refused to let the past die. The silence after Adrian's words pressed down on Emily like a heavy cloak. He stood near the staircase, half hidden in the shadows, as if the weight of her question, "Why do you stay?" was too unbearable to face. Emily wanted to step closer, to touch his arm, to offer comfort. But something inside her warned that crossing that line might awaken a part of him she was ready for. Instead, she asked softly, "Do you still see her, Isabella?" His jaw tightened. He didn't turn to look at her, but his voice came low, almost a whisper. "Every day, every night. This house makes sure of it." Her breath caught. So I wasn't imagining it. She was really in my room last night. Adrian finally faced her. His eyes were dark, stormy, but behind them flickered pain too raw to hide. "She appears to those who don't belong here. Maybe as a warning, maybe as a curse. I've stopped trying to understand." Emily's heart pounded. She should have been terrified. And she was, but beneath the fear was something else. Compassion. The idea of living every day haunted by the ghost of a lost love shook her. The thought of Adrian carrying that burden alone stirred something deep inside her. "Then let me help you," she said, surprising even herself. Adrian's brows furrowed. "Help me?" "Yes," Emily insisted, her voice trembling yet steady. "You've been living in this prison, this house of shadows, for God knows how long. Maybe I was brought here for a reason. Maybe I'm meant to know." His voice boomed, echoing through the vast hall. Emily flinched, but he stepped forward quickly, his expression torn. "You don't understand. This house doesn't give second chances. It takes, it consumes. And if you try to help me, it will take you too." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Emily's pulse raced, and she realized just how close they were standing. His presence, commanding and protective, should have frightened her. Instead, it pulled her in, like gravity itself. Her voice softened. "Then maybe it's not the house that decides. Maybe it's us." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes, hope quickly smothered by fear. He turned away, running a hand through his dark hair as though struggling to steady himself. "You shouldn't be here, Emily. The storm should have carried you past this place. You were never meant to step through that door." "But I did," she whispered. "And maybe I was meant to." Before Adrian could answer, a sharp bang shattered the air. The sound came from upstairs near the west wing, the place Adrian had forbidden her to enter. The walls seemed to tremble with it, dust falling from the high ceiling. Emily gasped. "What was that?" Adrian's expression hardened. "Stay here." But she reached for his arm before he could leave. "No. If this house is going to haunt me too, I need to know what's inside it. I can't keep pretending I'm just a guest waiting for morning. Please let me go with you." For a long moment, Adrian studied her, conflict raging across his features. Then finally he exhaled. "Fine, but stay close. No matter what you see, do not run." They climbed the staircase together, each step groaning under their weight. The air grew colder the higher they went, as though the mansion itself resented their intrusion. Emily clutched the banister, her hand brushing against Adrian's as he guided her through the dim corridor. At last they reached the west wing. The heavy door at its entrance stood ajar, the sound of whispering wind seeping through the crack. Adrian pushed it open, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. The corridor beyond was nothing like the rest of the mansion. The walls were darker, the air colder, and lining both sides were more portraits, every single one of Isabella. Emily's skin prickled. The painted versions of Adrian's wife stared down at her, each expression slightly different, some smiling, some sad, some hollow-eyed and lifeless. It was as if the walls themselves were alive with her memory. She glanced at Adrian. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. "This," he said quietly, "is why I told you not to come here." But before Emily could answer, a voice, soft, melodic, unmistakably female, whispered through the air, "Adrian." Emily's blood turned cold. Adrian stiffened, his eyes darting toward the end of the hall, where the shadows thickened into darkness. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Adrian, why did you leave me?" Emily clutched his arm, but he didn't move. His body trembled ever so slightly, and for the first time she realized Adrian was afraid too. The whispers of the dead filled the West Wing, but Emily realized something even more dangerous. The ghost wasn't only haunting Adrian, it was trying to claim her too. The air thickened with icy weight as the voice echoed again, "May, why did you leave me?" Emily's grip on his arm tightened. "It's her," she whispered. Adrian's face was rigid, his eyes fixed on the dark end of the hall. His lips barely moved as he spoke. "Don't answer her. Don't even breathe too loudly." But before Emily could stop herself, her voice trembled into the silence. "Isabella?" The whisper turned into a chilling laugh, soft yet echoing through every corner. The portraits on the walls seemed to shiver, their painted eyes glistening as though alive. Emily stumbled back, her chest heaving. Suddenly, a gust of freezing wind rushed through the corridor, slamming the door behind them shut. They were trapped. Adrian cursed under his breath and pulled Emily against him, shielding her with his body. "I told you never to come here," he growled, though his voice cracked with fear. "She doesn't want you in this house." Emily looked up at him, her fear colliding with something stronger. "Then why is she showing herself to me? Why not only you?" Adrian's eyes flickered with torment. "Because she thinks you're here to replace her." The words cut through Emily like a knife. Replace her. A ghost's jealousy. The very thought was absurd, yet the chill crawling across her skin told her it was real. The laughter turned into a wail, long and agonizing, shaking the walls. Emily pressed closer into Adrian, feeling his heartbeat racing against hers. Despite the terror, there was safety in his arms, a raw truth she couldn't deny. "Adrian," she whispered, "you've been living in her shadow for too long. Maybe it's not her haunting you. Maybe it's you haunting yourself." His eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. In that moment, something shifted, not in the house, but between them. Fear and sorrow twisted into something else, something fragile yet powerful. He cupped her face, his hand trembling. "Shouldn't care for me. Not here, not with her watching." Emily's voice broke, but her resolve didn't. Maybe love isn't about safe places. Maybe it's about finding light in the darkest ones. The wailing stopped.
No.
The corridor fell into an unnatural silence, so sudden it rang in Emily's ears. She dared to glance around. The portraits had stilled, the air had warmed ever so slightly, and for the first time the mansion seemed to hesitate. Adrian exhaled, his forehead pressing against hers. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to just them two souls, trapped, broken, yet finding solace in each other. But then, a final whisper curled through the air, soft as a dying breath. "If you love her, set me free." Adrian froze, his body rigid. Emily's breath caught as she realized the mansion wasn't only a prison. It was Isabella's tomb, her memory chained by Adrian's grief. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, tears slipped down his face. "Don't know if I can." Emily held his hand, her fingers entwining with his. "Then let me help you." The house groaned as though resisting, but the silence that followed felt different, less oppressive, almost watchful. Emily didn't know what awaited them beyond that night, but she knew one truth with every beat of her heart. She hadn't just stumbled into a stranger's mansion. She had walked into a story where fear birthed something stronger, love powerful enough to challenge even the dead. And the mansion itself seemed to listen.